Welcome back. This is Sandy with Sandy's Organized Chaos, and today we're going to be doing this cow and leopard spot print split tumbler with a tooled leather insert. As always, I'll make sure to put everything that I used today into the description box below, so that way you guys can use those items or purchase those items if you would like to. So let's wake up, prep these tumblers, and slay all day. Let's do this. Today I am using a 30-ounce classic skinny tumbler that I purchased through the Stainless Depot. I've already prepped and primed my tumbler this white color. Now one half will be cowhide and the other half will be the leopard spot. So what I do when I know I have to use tape is I'm going to go ahead and let my tumbler set overnight after I paint it this white color, just so that way I know that paint is properly adhered to the tumbler and won't peel off when I go to peel back my tape. The first thing I'm going to do is get my split going, so I'm just going to make a little template for the bottom. This just makes it a little bit easier to find the bottom, or you could just take your tape and kind of eyeball it from there. All I do with this piece of paper is I just fold it in half, stick it right on the middle, and then I'm going to mark either side so that way I know where my tape needs to go. Now, once my middle is all marked up here, I'm just going to take my tape and I'm actually going to run it across my shirt just to help out with that stickiness. So we're doing a bunch of different things to help make sure that our paint won't peel up with the tape. So I'm going to go ahead and get my line put on here. Then I'm going to go ahead and block it off just a little bit more because I'm going to take it out and spray paint it. The color I'm going to use for the other side is just this smoky beige. You can use any type of brown because I'm using a gold glitter and I just thought it would go really well underneath my gold glitter. All right, the tumbler is nice and dry, our tape is all peeled back, and we're ready to start applying our glitter. Now the first step here, I'm going to be using Golden and Pinnacle. This is just a white and gold glitter that I'm going to be using for this first half. I'm going to apply my glitter with just my amazing sealer. You could use Mod Podge, and I also have a nice fluffy brush that I bought from the Dollar Tree just to help apply it. Now I'm going to go ahead and start with my darker glitter first. So I'm going to go ahead and get my glue going on this brown half, which will essentially be the leopard print side. So I'm just going to be very careful, making sure that I stay within my line there and making sure that I smooth everything out as best that I can so that way there's no lumps and bumps in my glue. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply my glitter right to my glue here. Now, after I get my gold glitter all down, I'm just going to tap it off the best that I can, and then I'm going to come through with my chip brush and just really sweep away those edges so that way we can move on to applying the white to the opposite side. But that's the whole reason why we did the darker color first, so that way once we apply the white, we don't have to worry about any of that gold glitter accidentally going over to the other side and getting stuck down into it. All right, it is all swept away, and we're going to do the same exact thing on the opposite side, except we're going to use our white glitter on this side. Just a quick recap, I did not let that gold color side dry. We're just jumping right into the white. So after I get that white applied, my glue is actually a little bit thicker than Mod Podge, so it takes a little bit longer to dry. So I actually let my tumbler set overnight just to verify it is nice and dry before we move on to that next step. But if you're just using Mod Podge, it should only take about an hour or so for it to be fully dried. All right, it's the next day and it is nice and dry and we're ready to start sweeping off any extra glitter. This is where you really want to get in there with your chip brush, really sweep away all those glitters and make sure that there is nothing kind of left over. And this is really going to help out our process to make sure that our brushes don't get gunked up with extra glitter or anything like that. This is also the time that if you notice your glitter is kind of splotchy, you're going to need to go ahead and recoat it again with your glue and redo the same process where you apply your glitter just to make sure that your tumbler is nice and covered with your glitter. All right, now we're going to get started on our cow print side first. The color that I'm using, this is just a basic alcohol ink. This is Tim Holtz Teakwood. That's all I'm using for my cow print side. This is extremely simple. I've done this so many times. It is probably the easiest technique to use whenever it comes to this. I kind of wanted my cow prints to be all more symmetrical and longer with each other. So all I'm going to do is just very lightly squeeze my bottle, releasing some of that ink right onto the glitter. And it's going to kind of disperse under the glitter, giving us that more natural cowhide look. And then all I'm going to do is just make these longer lines so that way it has more of that longer look to it. I also like to come through and just kind of add just real random spots after I get they're just very abstract spots, you know, it doesn't matter. You can even go online and maybe check out some cow prints and see what you like. You can even double up your colors if you'd like. You could do a brown and a black. You could do whatever, a lighter brown. However you guys want to do this, it is completely up to you. But after I get my longer lines in, I'll come through and I just do up these like little spots here and there. I just really feel like it just really adds to it and gives it just a little bit more character. Now, if you've never worked with alcohol inks before, these pretty much dry once you apply them. So once you get your cow print look all done here, you're going to go ahead and move on to the next side, the leopard print side. So for my leopard prints, I'm going to be using this 2-inch chip brush. I have my glue. I also have kind of like a dark brown glitter color, which is called suede. And I have some black diamond for the outer ring portion of our leopard print. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my glue and my chip brush. I'm going to show you guys kind of like how the glue looks on the chip brush. That's how you want it to look. You want it to look kind of splotchy and all that. And I'll show you why here in a second. So I like my spots big and exaggerated, and I am working on a 30 ounce, so they're a little bit bigger. You know, you just kind of want to go based off the size of your tumbler, how big you want to make your spots. And I'm just going to go 2 on kind of each row. I'm just going to think of it each section as a row. And I'm just making these very abstract spots. That's all you want to do. And the reason why it's all splotchy on my chip brush, because that's the reason why I love these chip brushes, is because it gives us this kind of extra texture to it to make these spots look even more realistic. Now, once I get around to the bottom here, I just take it and I start my spot on the main base, and then I just gently roll my brush up and over, making sure that it extends over onto the bottom to really give us that finished look. Now, once all my glue spots are done, I just come through with my brush one more time just to make sure there's no big lumps of glue in there, and then we're going to go ahead and apply our brown glitter to our spots. And I just want to let you guys know we have not applied epoxy yet. No, we're just working on our glue glitter base so far. We're not adding our epoxy just yet. All right, so after I apply this glitter, I'm going to set my tumbler off to the side and let it dry for about an hour. This is just to make sure that any of those black glitters that we're going to be using here in a little bit don't accidentally get stuck down in the wrong places. So after I let it dry for about an hour, I just come through and kind of gently sweep it off, make sure there's no brown glitter on my white side, and then we're ready to finish this look up. So for my outer rings, I'm going to be using black acrylic paint because I'm not putting too much of my black glitter down, and this black paint will really make sure it's nice and saturated and give us that outer ring look that we'd like. And I'm just using a basic little brush here, whatever kind of brush you have on hand to be able to kind of do it. Because again, the outer ring needs to be kind of big and exaggerated, kind of like our spots. So all you're going to want to do is take a little bit of your black paint there, and you're just going to want to dab that along the inside and outside of your spot line. And again, this does not have to be perfect. The less perfect it is, the better it looks, is what I think. You just want to take your brush, follow those inconsistencies of the circles that you made, and that's all you want to do with your black acrylic paint. And I do come through and just kind of add just a little bit more texture to it. That's optional. You don't have to do that. And I'm just going to take a very small amount of my black glitter and just sprinkle it right on there. I just wanted to give it just a hint of kind of just a shimmer to it. So not too much, just a little bit goes a long ways. And then again, I'm just going to take this black acrylic paint and do the same thing all around my spots, just kind of following the inconsistencies of our circles and not making it perfect, and just sprinkling a little bit of that black glitter as I go. Now, after I get my outer ring all done, I did go back in between each one of these leopard spots, and I just added a little extra little black V in between each. I kind of like how that looks. It's completely up to you guys if you want to do that. Again, they're not perfect. They're just kind of like abstract V's in between, just to give it just a little extra. So I'm going to go ahead, and after I get this done, I'm going to go ahead and let that dry, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. All right, our tumbler is fully dry, our prints are put down, and we're ready to put on our first coat of epoxy. This is the most important step, is coming through with this chip brush and sweeping away any extra glitter. You want to sweep it until nothing is coming off anymore. That's how much you want to sweep it. It is extremely important to make sure that you do this, so that way once you apply your epoxy, it's not going to shift around. Now, what I like to do is take my 2x Ultra Semi-Gloss here, and I'm going to give it 3 coats of that. I'm going to spray it once, let it dry, spray it again, let it dry, spray it one more time, let that dry, and then we're ready to apply our epoxy. And the biggest tip I can give you guys is not to hold your can too close to your tumbler, especially on the cow print side, because it might make your inks bleed. So hold your spray paint can about 8 to 12 inches away, making sure it's not going to pool up on anything, and that will really help out with any type of bleeding you may get from your alcohol ink side. All right, so here's the test. Before I apply my epoxy, I do the glove test. I rub the bottom, I rub up around the rim, I do all that. If any glitter comes off, I give it another spritz of my Ultra Clear there. But if nothing comes off of my glove, we're ready to roll, and we're ready to get this first coat of epoxy applied. Now I have 30 mLs of epoxy here. Again, because I'm working on a 30-ounce tumbler, that's why I'm using so much epoxy. If you're using a bigger tumbler or a smaller tumbler, you may need to kind of go up or down from there with your measurements. I'm going to go ahead and apply all 30 mLs of this epoxy to my tumbler. Then I'll place it onto my turner, hit it up really good with my blowtorch, and let that cure the proper amount of time before we move on to the next step. All right, our first coat of epoxy is nice and cured. Now this was right over top of our raw glitter, so it probably will need another coat of epoxies, but the first thing we want to do is go ahead and trim up our rim really good. We're going to use our sanding block and sand down our rim as well. We're also going to come through and sand down any major points that might be on anything on the main base of the tumbler, and make sure that we get the bottom of the tumbler as well with our sandpaper. You're going to want to clean that up really good before you apply another coating of epoxy over top of this. We just want it nice and smooth for once we go to apply our decals to the outside of it. So once I am done here, I'm going to apply just 15-20 mLs of epoxy. You don't need very much, just enough to kind of cover up all the sanding that we did, because you don't want to spray paint over any type of sanding. You'll be able to see it through the paint. So now I'm going to go ahead and let that cure, and we'll be ready to move on to the next step. All right, so the next step is we want to measure where our insert is going to go. So our tumbler is nice and cured and ready to have that insert applied. So I knew I wanted to do something a little bit bigger, so I actually chose 3 inches in width. So I'm just going to choose that. Now, again, if you're using a smaller or bigger tumbler, you might want to bring down or bring up your measurements from there. And then I'm just going to measure the length just to make sure that it'll be able to fit completely top to bottom onto the tumbler. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to how we do the decal. I'm going to do 2 different ways. One is just a plain floral, so you can just have it like that. Or if you wanted to add personalization, I'll show you guys how to do a knockout of our image. So the first thing we're going to do is kind of make ourselves a little template to go by. I just went over to the shapes and I chose a square. I unlocked my square and I'm going to put in my dimensions. So width was 3 inches and height was 9.3. Now, I wasn't quite sure. I either thought roses or like a zebra print would have looked really cool to kind of go with the animal theme, but I went with roses. So I went over to my images onto my Cricut Design Space, because I do a monthly fee where I pay to be able to access their images. And I wanted something that was really easy to weed, and I'll show you why once we get everything applied. But I wanted something that was super easy and pretty much come off all in one fell swoop when we go to peel everything away. So I found these roses right here, and I will make sure to put this code down in the description box so that way you guys can find the exact roses that I used if you would like to. Or you can go on to Creative Fabrica or Etsy and find some really pretty rose decals if you would like to. So I'm going to go ahead and upload that onto my Cricut Design Space. I'm going to just bring it down ever so slightly. I didn't want it too big, and we're going to start making up our template here. So I'm just going to start to rotate it and figure out what looks best for me. And then I'm going to go ahead and start duplicating up this image. Now the second one that I did up, I'm going to go ahead and remove the leaf. So I'm going to go off to the right hand side here. I'm going to find where the leaves are located and just click on the little eyeball icon and take the leaves off of there. So that way I have a little bit more room to kind of rotate everything around. And from here, you just want to fill in, like I said, until you find it visually pleasing. You want to make sure that nothing overlaps. You just want to make sure you have enough room to kind of have everything in there and still look really nice and filled in. Without touching anything, I'm going to go ahead and remove that gray box from behind. I'm going to highlight everything together, and I'm going to go down to the lower right hand there and weld it all together. If you don't weld it, you won't be able to slice your image out. So now I'm going to go ahead and get my box put back in there. I'm going to get that lined up to where I would like it, and then we're going to go ahead and slice out our floral design from our box. So to slice out our floral design, I'm just going to again highlight everything all together, come back down to the lower right hand and slice and remove all that extra stuff from behind, and you'll be left with a beautiful floral design and the dimensions that you need for our cutout in the front. So now you could either leave it as is, or we want to go ahead and add some personalization. So I found this really cute font. Again, I'll put that down in the description box below. It came right off the Cricut Design Space as well. And the first thing we want to do is go ahead and type out the quote we would like to put on there, the personalization. We're going to go ahead and apply an offset. I just chose this 0.25, I believe it is. It's a nice big offset. That's going to give us plenty of room for this knockout that we want to do inside. Now I'm going to go ahead and get this all centered up. I'm just going to highlight it all together, go up and pick a line and click on center, and it will automatically bring everything all together right into the center for us. Now the next step you want to do is go ahead and highlight everything once again, go down to your slice button once again, and slice your personalization out of your floral design. You're going to go ahead and delete all that extra stuff that was left in the center there. You're going to go ahead and do the same thing where you align into the center your personalization, and then you're going to want to weld everything together. And there you go. Now you have a nice strip to be able to put onto the front of your tumbler. Now I'm just going to use some black vinyl to cut that out. And once I get it cut out, I am going to need to make sure that I trim it myself, making sure that my lines are all nice and straight. So I just go right up against where my decal is, and then we're ready to start applying it to the tumbler. Now you don't want to weed it just yet. So I did make up two. I'm going to put another one off to the side. You always want to cut up two. You never know. So I'm going to go ahead and get my transfer tape onto my decal. And again, you're not going to weed it just yet. We're going to reverse weed it after we get it onto the tumbler. So I'm going to go ahead and burnish that down really good. And we're going to make some measurements onto our tumbler to make sure that this is all lined up nice and straight. So I'm going to take my measuring tape again and place it right into the center, just like we did when we went to go measure out our decal to begin with, and just put some little dots so that way we know where it needs to be lined up at on our tumbler. So because we're working with a very small decal, it's only 3 inches wide, I'm just going to remove my decal completely off its paper backing. I'm going to line up the top at the top dot that I did and the bottom at the bottom dot that I did, so that way I know it's nice and straight and even on my tumbler. And because we're working with a skinny, just roll it right on, burnish it down really good, and then we're ready to move on to this next step. Now, if you notice when you go to put your decal down, there are some creases and some of your flowers and stuff. Don't burnish it down too much. We'll fix that after it's all said and done. So the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and put our tape right up against our tumbler here. This is going to help us figure out where we would like to spray paint once we go to apply our spray paint to make that tooled leather look. So I'm going to go ahead and take some painter's tape, line it up on both sides of my tumbler. Now, after you have your tape template all applied, now is the time you're going to want to go ahead and start peeling back all that extra vinyl that we don't want, just leaving our roses and our personalization in the center. I just find it much easier kind of doing it this way versus, weeding it off of the tumbler. It was just easier for me this way to do it this way. So I hope it's helpful for you guys as well. So I did have a couple little pieces here, and after I got done weeding, I'm going to come back through and just very gently kind of pull up these pieces, pull it taut, make sure that I burnish it down really good, and that's going to really help out with any little creases that might have accidentally happened on those decals we want to stay onto the tumbler. All right, now that the weeding is all done, we're going to go ahead and tape up the bottom as well. Now I wanted mine to kind of have a little bit more of a look to the bottom, so I'm actually just going to take a piece of tape. I'm going to follow that bump right on the bottom of my tumbler there, if you guys can see it. So I'm just going to lay my tape down, push it down really good so that way I can see where that kind of bumps down, and I'm just going to follow that with a very sharp knife, and there we go. Now we have a little template for the bottom of our tumbler as well to kind of finish off that look of it wrapping around. Now we're going to go ahead and move outside and give it a spray paint. All right, because this is already going to have like a tooled leather look to it, I know I wanted it to be brown, so I just chose my smoky beige once more to make sure that I kind of went with the tooled leather look. Now, to make sure I don't get any pooling up or drips, I'm just going to do short, quick bursts and just do a very light coating. That's all you need. You're going to let that dry completely, and then you're going to move back inside, and you're not going to remove that tape yet because we still have one more process we have to do. So just make sure your tape is nice and flat for this next part, and then we're going to start making it have that tooled leather look. Just like with the cow spots, I'm just going to use my Teakwood again, and I have this little makeup sponge that I got from the Dollar Tree, and we are just going to put a line of this coloring right into the sponge here, and then we're just going to start applying it in an up and down motion, not quite like how you would do a wood grain. You want it more kind of seamless rather than having those lines of a wood grain. So this is all about layering. I'm going to start off first just using straight up alcohol inks, and then I am going to kind of go into using some of my rubbing alcohol as well, but I'm going to go ahead and get this first layer of my inks applied first and just kind of go from there and gauge how I would like to do this, because I kind of wanted a look of buildup inside of the decals. So again, this is just all about layering, trying not to forget about my bottom as well. And I'm just going to keep going, layering these colors on. Now I probably did about 4 layers of the ink, and now I'm going to move on to just a little bit of my rubbing alcohol, and this is going to kind of start to really pull everything together. And I'm putting a very small amount of alcohol, rubbing alcohol, onto my sponge. Okay, you want to be very careful, but you're going to see it's going to start kind of pulling everything together and giving it more of that textured leather look that we would want, rather than just kind of looking like a wood grain tumbler. And again, I'm just going to continue on with this process where I kind of switch back and forth from inks and rubbing alcohol to kind of give it that look that I'm after here. You really don't need to fuss with it too much. Just get it to about how you would like it. You definitely don't want any streaks into it, but you just want to build up those colors until you kind of have it the coloring that you would like. All right, and once I am done, I think I like it just like this. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get this tape peeled off. But first, before I do that, I need to wash my hands because I forgot to put gloves on, and inks are all over my fingers. And if you accidentally touch the front of your tumbler, you're gonna accidentally stain your tumbler, and we don't want that. So go rinse your hands up if you forgot to put gloves on. See my fingers. And then we're gonna go ahead and start removing that tape. I'm gonna show you guys how to sand some spots down if it accidentally leaked up under your tape. And another thing I forgot to mention is that this will lighten up a bit once you go to apply your epoxy. It's not going to stay as dark. The inks will lighten up just a bit. All right, so I did notice there was a spot up by the rim that kind of did leak under there, so I'm going to go ahead and take care of that right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my rubbing alcohol and figure out if it'll just wipe away, and if it won't, it's just kind of stained in the epoxy, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and take our sanding block and we're going to give it just a very light sanding, and that will take care of that issue if you happen to have that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I want to apply a very thin coating of epoxy over top of this before I apply my pinstriping. I'm going to spray it down with my 2x Ultra, again, making sure that I hold my can back pretty far from my tumbler so that way I don't disrupt my inks that are on the tumbler. I'm going to go ahead and put about 15 mLs of epoxy over top of this. I'm going to let that cure, and then we're ready to finish it up with our pinstriping. All right, it's all cured, and once more I'm going to come through with my sanding block before I add my pinstriping. I'm going to make sure my rim is nice and clean. I'm going to make sure that bottom is nice and smooth, and then we're going to get that pinstriping applied. Now this is pretty basic. I just chose a very pretty, it's like a satin gold color. It looks really pretty under epoxy. It kind of looks almost kind of like antique gold once the epoxy is applied. So I'm going to go ahead and put on my pinstriping, and I'm going to show you guys how I do my bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap that around to the bottom, and I'm actually going to cut it right where we stopped our wood grain. So right there, I'm going to go ahead and trim it, and then I'm going to do the same exact thing on the opposite side. Now I will make sure to put the dimensions of the pinstriping that I used if you guys want to use the same dimensions as two, but it's pretty basic. Just, you know, make it two pinstriping lines, put it onto your tumbler, and now we're going to go ahead and start wrapping our last little piece around the bottom here. Now right in the center, because I only did two, I'm just going to use the stuff that is right in the middle. It's the same exact thing. Your design space kind of separates it almost equally on each other, so you can go ahead and use that striping right into the center of your paper there. Now all I'm going to do is line this up the best that I can onto the one side. I'm going to hold it very tightly down with my finger. And then after I have it held down very tightly with my finger, I'm going to pull it tightly so it kind of stretches it. I know you guys probably know what I mean when you kind of stretch your vinyl, because it will stretch. And I'm going to use the warmth of my finger. So I'm pulling and sliding my finger along to make sure that it curves with that curve that we have going on the bottom there. If you're having some difficulty, you could always take a little bit of heat and do it and apply it to it as well to kind of form it and mold it into the shape that you would like. But I find the heat from my finger is good enough to be able to do this as well. And you just want to follow it completely around while holding it tight. Go ahead and trim that up, and then we're going to add the rest of our pinstriping. So I just wanted something just a little extra. So I have a bunch of these nail tapes that I've collected, and I just found this rose gold. I just wanted something a little bit more monochromatic, like I wanted it all kind of go together. So this rose gold I thought was beautiful. It went very well with the tones that I was going for, and it also bends easily as well for what we need to do on the bottom. So I actually made this piece kind of come just a little bit off of my first pinstriping that I did. So you see there's a little bit of a gap there, and I just really kind of like the way that looks. It almost gives it a little bit of a modern touch to it. It's rustic meets modern, you know. So I'm just going to go ahead and lay this nail tape down. And another thing is whatever piece you're holding on to, you don't want to have that laid down, or it will kind of lift up once you apply your epoxy. Now let's go ahead and do the bottom. Again, we're going to do the same thing as we did with the first one. I'm going to get it down, and I'm going to use my finger to kind of warm it and stretch it and bend it into the shape that I would like, meeting up to the other side. And what I meant by not to use the piece that you're holding on to, you see I have a lot more extra that I'm holding on to that's not going to be applied to the tumbler. I'm going to completely remove that, because the oils from your fingers will make the stickiness of the tape not stick down to your tumbler. So you don't want to touch the bottom of the tape that will be applied to the tumbler. So that's why I have a lot of extra hanging off the edge just for that. All right, now I went ahead and I put a stripe down the center as well to kind of finish this all up. I think it was just enough. I didn't want anything too big. That's all I wanted. Just very sleek, modern, rustic look to it. Now all that is left to do is add our last two finishing coats of epoxy, and she is good to go. Whether you take this design and duplicate it as is, or you take it and let it inspire you to create something that is completely your own, I hope that you guys had a lot of fun watching this tutorial today. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.